Is it wrong for MPs to also be landlords? 0207 862 2222 is the number. The homelessness minister, Rushanara Ali, is facing criticism for increasing the rent on a house she owns by £700, allegedly within weeks of the previous tenant's contract ending. She originally charged £3,300 a month for the 4-bedroom East London townhouse, but the tenants were notified that their fixed-term lease wouldn't be renewed. They left soon after, and then the property was put on the market. It didn't sell, but the property was then put back up for rent, and tenants told the newspaper they're paying around £4,000 a month. Ali has previously spoken out against private renters being exploited and claimed Labour would empower people to challenge unreasonable rent increases. Lowri, does this smack of hypocrisy to you?
It's, oh dear, it's highly embarrassing, isn't it? And of course it follows the case of another Labour MP, you may remember, who claimed that he had no idea that the properties he owned, I think 25 of them, were like, you know, sort of unfit for human habitation. And oh my goodness, it's all the agent's fault. So this is not helpful for Labour. I think that in principle, there's no reason why an MP shouldn't be a landlord, not a slumlord, a good landlord, because we need them. The housing stock, there isn't enough of private rented accommodation. That's one of the reasons why you've got rent for like £4,000 a month. That must have been some 4-bed house. I'd like to see inside that. £4,000 a month.
It's London, isn't it? I mean, is that we have to accept? We have to assume that's market rent for that. Yeah,
but how on earth do you afford £4,000 a month? I mean, that just seems unbelievable. That even 4 tenants, £1,000 each. That's a lot of money. But
£250 a week. I don't know.
I turn the sitting room into a bedroom as well. That happens a lot. Yeah.
Well, the question is it an HMO or what's going on? Because why is that? I mean,
taking away from her specific indication, that idea then that MPs can also be landlords. Yeah. Do you see an inherent contradiction?
No, I don't, because I think it isn't just another business. A lot of people are accidental landlords. I had a house that I couldn't sell, like this MP in a way, couldn't sell it and had to let it because I was paying bills on it, which I couldn't afford. So I think, particularly at the moment, the housing market's really difficult. There are a lot of people who are renting stuff out who don't really want to rent it out, but they can't just have it sitting there doing nothing. I think it depends on how you behave as a landlord. And I think if you're seen to have a house rented for X, end a tenancy and then start a new tenancy and put £700 on the rent, that doesn't look very good. Whatever the reality of it, that optically, that's not great, is what I would say.
I mean, it comes down to the policies that you're endorsing, the policies that you're bringing in. We're going to look at those in a second. Do you see a contradiction, a conflict there, Faiza? If you are an MP, you represent constituents and possibly even in your own constituency, you're renting out to them.
Yeah, I think we have to understand this case and others like Jazz Atwell, and there's lots of cases with Conservatives as well, this isn't just one party, that where our government and our politicians are so often seen as not really caring about the people first and having their own interests, right? Because there's been a massive collapse in trust in our politicians. So this is in the context of understanding that people don't trust politicians anyway. They think that they're there for themselves, and this might not be true of all of them, but that's the sense. And then also a housing crisis that not only is about London and rent increases, you know, which have gone from and around the country, they were about 20% of average wages in 2000. Now they're about 35%. In London, it's over 50%, right? And that's why I'm saying, you know, I know young people, putting the sitting room as a bedroom in order to make it work. Otherwise, they can't afford to rent in London.
Okay.
And so what we need is politicians willing to do the things that need to be done to really address the huge problems we're having in housing, the housing crisis. And I think the issue is where you have politicians being landlords, there's an obvious conflict of interest. Now, some of them will still do the right thing, but some of them won't. And I think if you're going into politics, then you are not there to be, you know, making money off your properties. You should be there with your constituents in mind, but hang on, first and foremost. And that's the problem here. It's not to say that all of them have that, but some of them could. And we are in a period where we need to be rebuilding trust in our democracy.
But that person may have a mortgage which needs to be covered by the rent. The mortgage may be very large. I think if we start saying you can't be a landlord, what else can't you be?
Well, they're earning 95 grand plus a year, you know. So I don't think these are people that are hard up and can't pay their bills.
But you would have had, well, hopefully, some kind of job before you became an MP. There's no guarantee when you stand for Parliament you'll be elected, of course. So one hopes they'd have had some experience. So we're saying if you can't be a landlord, can you also not run any kind of business? Which businesses can't you run? I think we want a broad breadth of experience for our MPs, and that could.
I think that's a bit different, though. I think being a landlord in a housing crisis. No, I'm not saying it makes you evil, of course not. But what I'm saying is that there is an obvious conflict of interest. And we saw this even with debates around Grenfell. There was a horrific thing that happened when there was a vote on, and this was back in 2017, like a vote on making landlords ensure that their housing is fit for habitation for humans. And there was all the vast majority of Tories voted against that, and I think 57 of them were also landlords. So you start asking those questions about, well, are they doing this because they don't want those rules to apply to themselves? And it does happen, and we are in the midst of a housing crisis. So I think there is a particular issue here.
But then if you're extending that idea, you're also saying any MP that has a dog, is a dog owner, cannot pass policy on owning a dog. I mean, you have to be engaged with the real world, Faiza, to be able to make decisions about it.
Well,
it's not because there are good landlords. There are good landlords that are housing providers. And
already we can name 2 in the last year that are bad landlords.
But do we ever get to name the good ones? It's only when stories come up like this that we all damn them and say, you know, typical.
But the idea that people are not acting with that in mind, right? I'm not saying all of them. Again, I'm not saying all of them, but that for some of them, they're thinking, actually, these rules, if you're owning, like, not just one property, this is a particular case, right? But if you've got, Jazz Atwell's got dozens of properties, others will have more. You know, if you're in that situation and you're like, actually, this bill will apply to me and make it difficult for me to earn my money, then, you know, that's what we saw with some of the Grenfell votes, for instance, that you did have these landlords voting against policies that would make it better for everyone else.
OK, let's just I think for context, it's worth just reminding ourselves a little bit about the Labour's Renters' Right Bill. This is going to become law next year. And we've picked out just a few of the measures that are going to come in. Ending no-fault evictions. So that means that Section 21 evictions, where you give somebody 2 months' notice, you don't have to give a reason, you go to court and they're out. That's going to stop. Unfair rent rises, I suppose you could look at that in the context of the story that we're talking about and say, is that something that you know, feels like it doesn't mesh with the behaviours we've seen? The rent rises, that's going to finish. Fairer grounds for repossession. So actually saying to tenants, you have to cross this line before we take the property back. And finally, ending rental bidding, where you basically put the house up for grabs, the property up for grabs.
If we actually had a landlord here, maybe we'll take some calls from landlords, but some landlords will tell terrible stories about tenants who don't pay their rent, and then the months and months it takes them to get their property back, or tenants who damage property, or tenants who refuse to move out of property. It isn't all a story of these evil landlords, great tenants. It works the other way around.
Is that a reason?
We have a couple of, we have a housing crisis. We also got a problem with people subletting council property. So you get given a social home and then you move out and you sublet it at an elevated rent. So some tenants don't behave very well.
OK, but is that another reason not to have MPs as landlords? Because effectively, when there's a dispute, they could hold them to ransom and say, well, look, you're an MP. I'm going to spread it across the papers and tell people about the terrible things you've done.
No, there's another reason to behave better, isn't it? If you're selected as MP, one would hope that your local party or even the National Party does some due diligence about what kind of person are you.
OK,
you know?
Let's take some calls. Simon's in Manchester. Simon, do you think MPs should be landlords? Does it make sense, or is there an inherent conflict of interest there?
They should be landlords. You could say there could be a conflict of interest, but again, as long as it's registered on the member's interest, no, I don't see why it shouldn't be. We are. I am a landlord, obviously. These are investments. The government have decided we're not working people, so MPs can have investments like anybody else. Property is just another investment.
Do you think that there is that risk, though, Simon, that it could come round and bite them later on if there's a dispute between them and their tenant. And actually, it would be better to clear the decks and for 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, hand that property to somebody else.
No, I do take your point. It could be, but that would mean that they should really act above reproach. I mean, they should be the very, very best of landlords because of their position. The tenants of those landlords should be well blessed indeed.
OK, Simon, thanks for your call. Let's take another one. Pete's in East Yorkshire. Pete, do you think that MPs should step back from being landlords for the time while they're in the Commons?
No, I certainly do not. Any MP, irrespective of which political wing you come from, can do what they want with their investments. That's why we live in a democracy. I fully believe in that. However, I do believe that this young woman has crossed the Rubicon because she is the Minister for the Homeless. Now, I do not know her financial position. She may have needed to sell the house. I believe she wants to sell the house. It didn't sell. So then she probably put the rent up to make it more attractive for other people to buy and rent. I do not listen. I'm simply not party to that. However, I do believe her position, I'm not saying her political career has come to an end, but her position as a Minister for the Homeless has become untenable. And so she needs to regroup. I think she's been ill-advised, needs to regroup. Who told her? And I don't know. But I do believe her position has become certainly untenable.
There's an argument, Pete, that as a housing provider, she probably has more of an insight into the housing market, the housing crisis, than most of us do, because she understands what it is to give people a home.
I would suggest as a counter-argument, not necessarily as a housing provider, but as a Minister for the Homeless, I would like to think she was concentrating more of her effort on Ministry for the Homeless and let other people in a managerial capacity other than herself to deal with that.
Do you think, thanks for your call, Pete, do you recognise that there is something in that if you accept that kind of a job, which is so specific, ending homelessness, at that point, maybe you step away from your commitments
step away.
as a landlord?
If you hand it back, you have to sell it to somebody has to want to buy it, you have to pay capital gains, all that stuff. So it's not quite as simple as just saying, well, I'll hand you the keys. But I think you're right. When she was offered that job, she perhaps should have said, this isn't the right job for me, there's another job.
I mean, homelessness is at a record high, and certainly, you know, the hypocrisy of this sort of behaviour. But I think in general, when you look at, say, some of the new points in the renters bill, there are quite a few loopholes still within that. I think it's a good step forward, but there's certainly more that could be done. When you look at the scale of the housing crisis, there's, you know, even just being able to put up that £700, you could still find ways to do that with a new tenant. Yes, not the same tenant, but with a new tenant. And I just think we're not going as far as we need to on the housing crisis, partly because of all of these vested interests and these thoughts that inevitably go through people's minds. Like, I understand people have investments, but I do think that if you're going in to be an MP, and I actually did run to be an MP, I would never have dreamed to have like investments. I would that would somehow, you know, either be perceived to or actually make me think, oh, maybe I don't really want this to happen.
I just wonder whether we do run the risk also of narrowing the field of people that become MPs even further. If you cut out people that have any kind of property, you'll end up... who will you end up being an MP?
The problem is the opposite, though. The problem is not that we don't have enough MPs with properties. We don't have enough MPs without properties who are working class, who have done normal everyday jobs. That's the problem. It's not that we don't have enough MPs with investments and the rest of it. That's just not the case when you look at who makes up the...
I agree with Matt, you want more experience. I've rented and I've been a landlord. I've done both.
But there's lots of different types of experience. I'd rather have more teachers, for instance.
We do have to move on, guys. Thank you. Thanks for that. But we do have to move on. Don't forget.